Best Book Bits brings you Joshua Humphreys, a writer of novels, plays, histories, essays, text messages, self-assembling furniture instructions, sarcastic letters to yoga instructors, globetrotter entertainer, comedian, educator, ex-Australian, and long-lost friend. Joshua, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thanks, Mecca. Very good to be here.
No problem. For those of you who don't know the real Josh Humphreys, give us a brief recap of you and your journey so far.
So I'm primarily a comedy novelist. It's kind of a literary genre that I've been building over the last 5 or 6 years. Halfway between sitcom and comedy film, an elegant literary novel. They meet in the middle, and you're, theoretically laughing as you're reading, as though you're watching a comedy film. And for the last 6 years, I've been traveling the world and writing those as best I can.
Where have you been?
That question is an odyssey in and of itself. Since 2013, I actually have a pie graph that I worked out recently out of extreme boredom. Since 2013, I've spent 25% of my time in Vietnam, 25% of my time in London, and then it diminishes from Bangkok, Italy, Greece, and then Cambodia, and then the rest. So they've been the main haunts in the last.
You were recently in Mexico, and you actually got robbed in Mexico, and had to get the hell out of there before COVID locked you down. Talk about that.
Yeah, that was the most stressful week of my entire life. I'd gone to Mexico to break up that pie chart, to just throw something random in there. And my second week there, my wallet got stolen. I found out my ex-girlfriend was stalking me. And then coronavirus hit as hard as it hit, and so I had to hightail it out of Mexico and get the fuck out of. I had no access to any money whatsoever, and the only thing that saved me was being an author. As I was looking for my wallet where I thought I lost it, I heard a voice behind me saying, "Are you Joshua Humphreys?" And it didn't register at first, and they said it again. I turned around, I looked properly homeless. I was all frazzled, I was sunburned because I'd been looking for my wallet for 3 hours. And this girl says, "You're Joshua Humphreys, right? I'm reading Exquisite Hours, one of your novels." And I just looked at her and said, "Oh my God, you're about to save my life." Because I had to borrow from her the money I needed to get to the airport to leave Mexico. Otherwise, I would have had no access to any money whatsoever.
And you had no idea?
About what?
And you had no idea who she was, but she was reading your book in Mexico? That's amazing.
It's happened a couple of times, actually. But yeah, I had no idea who she was. She was reading Exquisite Hours.
So how many books have you written so far? Is it 6 or is it more than that?
It's 1, 2, 3, 4 comedy novels. And I wrote a Shakespearean rom-com in Shakespearean English. And I've released a History of Venice as well, a short history of Venice. So however many that is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 so far.
Yeah, wow. Well, I'm going to take the audience back a little bit. So for those of you who don't know Josh Humphreys, being an ex-Australian, he's actually a Melburnian. We actually went to school together at Glaston Park Secondary College. A shout out to everyone who graduated in 2003 with me and Josh. We have a history together, going back to playing football at lunchtime at schools and being very close friends, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. And then Josh went off to do, what did you do after 2003? Where did the story begin after you left school?
I went straight to university. I went to La Trobe and did environmental science for a year and a half. But I've always been obsessed with history. And I hated the science degree so much that I was skipping tests and lectures and stuff to go and read history books in the library. And then I remember I had a test on bushfire behavior, and I just could not be asked doing it. So I went to the library, and I spent the hour and a half reading a book on the American Civil War, and I realized that I should probably switch degrees. So I took the rest of the year off, came back to the history degree. That took me 4 years because I went to Europe for 4 or 5 months. Graduated 2010, I think, with a history degree from La Trobe.
And then when did your travels begin, or what did you do after 2010?
At the end of 2010, I was doing stand-up comedy and I was doing theatre through university, and it was kind of like sketch comedy, very Monty Python influenced, probably too Monty Python influenced. And then I had a show that I was going to take to the Fringe Festival that year, and the show was in rehearsals, and halfway through rehearsals, one of the girls in the cast had brought in a novel, and a 5-minute break, I picked up that novel, and by the end of the first page, I realized that I didn't want to be doing sketch comedy and stand-up, and I wanted to write funny novels, because by the end of the first page, I knew immediately that this was funnier, smarter, and better than what I was doing, and I didn't like that feeling. So I then quit the show, pulled the show off, then took a year to basically teach myself how to write novels, and then it wasn't for another 3 or 4 years that I actually managed to come up with one that I was okay with calling a novel.
And what was the first book? What was the title of that one?
The one I burnt and threw away, or the one I actually released?
Yeah.
The one I burnt and threw away was called Winter.
The one you burnt away and the one you released?
The one I burned and threw away was called Winter's Cost.
So you've done 6 books, yeah.
And that was the title was from an Isaac Rosenberg poem.
Why'd you throw it away?
Because it was shit. It wasn't very good. It was my first attempt at anything at all. And it was just me basically learning how to string sentences together coherently. I think in 2014, I released Waxed Exceeding Mighty, which is officially my first comedy novel.
And how was that received? What was that like, sort of getting that out into the marketplace and sort of labeling yourself as an author and promoting the book?
Its release died on its arse. I knew I didn't have much of a following or a readership or anything, so I came up with a marketing device that I called Steal This Novel. And what I did was I had a largish social media following, so I think I used all the money I'd saved up to buy 50 or 100 copies of the novel, and then I would put it into bookstores in London, take a photograph of it, and then when I walked out, post it on social media with the hashtag Steal This Novel, and I would tell people where it was, and they could go and steal it from a bookstore and read it. But yeah, it didn't reach a large audience, that one.
Well, I've actually seen you on social media dress up as a mermaid. Do you want to touch on where the mermaid outfit came from?
Yeah, so the second novel, Exquisite Hours, which got accepted by a literary agent, but I told the literary agent to stuff himself, and released it myself as well. And I don't know, one day I think maybe I was in the bath or something. There's a scene in the novel where the main character, who is a inveterate but very skilled liar, she is telling a guy that she's hanging out with that she used to work as a mermaid. And I just had this idea to dress up as a mermaid and read from the book. And so I bought a mermaid costume off eBay and then spent the better part of a Melbourne summer, my last Melbourne summer, reading from the book while dressed as a mermaid.
Talk to me about your mental state back in the day.
Lasagna. La 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 la, the arsonist had oddly shaped feet. Lasagna. Let's talk of graves, of worms, and epitaphs. Make dust our paper, and with rainy eyes write sorrow on the bosom of the earth. Bosom of the earth, the bosom, 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 lasagna. Hello.
Like, being an ex-Australian, people probably from smoking a pipe, drinking, traveling around the world, dressing up as a mermaid, all to promote your books, and also talking about a genre that a lot of people aren't vested into or don't know a lot about history. And
back then, I got called a couple of times a shameless self-promoter. But the fact of the matter is, if you are a novelist or a writer working with an agent and a publisher, you have entire industries geared to the promotion of your work. And if you're doing it yourself, you kind of have to think outside the box. You have to really push it. And if I didn't do that with the first novel because I didn't kind of believe in it 100%, but Exquisite Hours I knew to be kind of so good that I could back myself and really just convince people any way I could to read it, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. So it kind of paid off. The mermaid costume paid for itself eventually.
Ed fund your travels with the book sales. I know you've traveled the world on book sales alone, but you've also done. You're an expert in Venice. Do you want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah.
that?
So I was talking one day to a woman who ran wellness retreats in all over the world. A yoga clown. And I was talking to her about Venice and how much I loved Venice and how much I knew about it. And she said, "Oh my God, this is amazing. I would love for you to take me on a tour around Venice." And the actual writing of the novels, it only takes up about 6 months of my year. It's a very intense but short process. And so for the other 6 months, I don't have very much to do. I thought, what if I gave to people my kind of love for Venice and everything I knew about Venice? So I turned everything I knew into an architectural and artistic history of Venice. And then I just kind of said, who wants to come to Venice? I'll take you on a tour of Venice. And it turned into a thing as well. And then last year with COVID, I realized that was over because nobody was traveling to Italy anytime soon to hang out with a stranger. So I turned it into a virtual tour. And I went to Venice with what are they called? A gimbal and an iPhone. And I filmed the tour in Venice as though you're on the tour, kind of first-person perspective, with Venice completely empty of tourists, not a single tourist. So that ended up being a completely unique experience. And the tour still can be taken at any time through my website.
Venice as you have never seen her before, and will never see her again. After 8 years of studying Venetian art and history, and after visiting 12 times, including 4 seasons as a private tour guide, I have at last turned all that I know of the world's most beautiful city into the Venetian cultural experience. The Stones of Venice Tour. Like no other place, Venice's political, creative, and spiritual history can be read and heard upon her every gorgeous palace and sea-washed stone. Her windows, her churches, her canals, every corner of Venice tells a colossal tale of power and wealth, faith and reason, plague and decline, war, and the constant struggle for peace. Filmed and presented as though you're in Venice on the tour, with a novelist and Venice aficionado as your narrator and guide, the Stones of Venice Tour introduces you to a city that will give you a lifetime of spiritual and intellectual nourishment. As you walk through 1,000 years of history, art, and architecture, you not only stand before the Basilica of St. Mark, beside the Grand Canal, and beneath the greatest painting in all the world, but you learn what each and every stone of Venice means. For as well as the dates and the heroes and all the very pretty paintings, Venice knows things. But you can only show them to you if you know how to look for them. Marveling at her statues, her tombs, her glittering waters, the Stones of Venice Tour teaches you how to see. And if you'll meet me at sunrise between the columns of the Piazzetta, I can begin passing on to you all the invaluable lessons contained within the Stones of Venice.
So people can access that?
It's called the Stones of Venice Tour. I think if you Google it or if you find it through my website, you can sign up to take it. It comes with a Q&A with me, so that I can answer any questions that are not answered by the... I think it's 6 hours. It's a 6-hour walk through empty Venice.
Wow, and you're in Greece at the moment, correct? Doing the Stones of Athens?
Yeah. So the same principles of history and art that I used for the Venice tour, I'm transferring to a history of ancient Greece. But instead of art and history, it's philosophy and history. So it takes you through the narrative history of ancient Greece, woven through its philosophical strands, and it's filmed as well as though you're walking around, ancient Sparta, ancient Messene, ancient Athens.
Yeah, wow. And you're also spending time in Vietnam on the motorcycle. I've seen some footage back in the day of that, which was fantastic, and doing the Angkor Wat tours as well. Is that correct? So you're a man of many talents.
I have a motorbike waiting for me in Vietnam. It's my most beloved possession. And when eventually Vietnam opens after COVID, I can go back to it. But I also am going to do the same kind of tour, virtual tour of the history of Cambodia and Thailand. They're very intertwined. But I can't do it until COVID is kind of at least a little bit over. So until then, Greece.
And how's Greece treating you so far? How long have you been in Greece for?
I think I've been here a month this time. I was here for 4 months last year, a few months before that. I love Greece. It's like I invented the country before I even got here. Like I said, all right, what do I want in a country? I want unlimited tzatziki. I want unlimited grilled meat. I want perfect weather, perfect beaches, and so it's where I'm calling home for the next long while.
And the women aren't too bad.
Women,
as well.
I don't know about that. Some of the women you see when you walk down the street kind of bring a smile to your face. The eyebrows is often in the singular rather than the plural.
I spent some time in Greece myself in 2012, and I was there with my lovely wife. We lived in Europe, and I was UK and travelled Europe and went to Greece. And Athens is amazing, and Mykonos, Delos, and all the islands as well. Santorini, beautiful place. So you're in Athens at the moment, but will you be doing island hopping soon, or any tours apart from?
No, I'm actually in
Athens or
southern
anything like
Greece. I'm in in the Mani Peninsula. It was the last part of Greece converted to Christianity. It was the first part of Greece to rebel against Turkish occupation. It's very quiet, very picturesque, and Athens is too big. Athens is too hot, too loud. I need peace and quiet in order to work efficiently.
Yeah, understand. And tell us about your obsession with the pipe. And yes, not the pipe as what other people might think about, but...
Oh, back to school. How about you, Sideburns? You want some milk? Rather have a beer. Don't put it out with your boots, Tad. Don't tell me my business, devil woman. Call the fire department. This one's out of control.
My grandfather smoked a pipe his whole life. It's one of my earliest and fondest memories of him putting sugar on his cornflakes while he's smoking tobacco in the kitchen. And then when I had one of his pipes after he died.
I said that would have been a sight to see, a bit of cereal in the morning with a pipe out the side of your mouth.
Yeah, I had one of his pipes after he died. And then I think one day in kind of 2011 or 12, I gave it a go. And I found it mildly pleasant. And then when I went to write my first novel, I took my own pipe with me to Vietnam. And it just became a habit. It's very conducive to thought and concentration. And I am very fidgety when I work, because I think most people don't realize writing is just literally sitting still for about 6 hours straight. And I'm very fidgety, and the pipe kind of centers my attention and allows me to concentrate for extended periods of time.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, I've written a book myself, took 13 years to write, and one of the hardest things I've ever had to do is to actually sit down with your own thoughts. And I released it last year, wrote it in 2007, 6 editions, and there it is for my audience who know what it is, but Success in 50 Steps. Now, I want to talk about something which a lot of people back at home probably don't know, but one of the things that you're famous for is hacking the high school Wikipedia page. And just to refresh your memory about that,
Yeah, so it was actually after it. It was the year after I finished school, and I was hanging out with Slav and Rogers, who you might remember, and all of us were doing stand-up comedy together. We thought we were very funny, and then I think Wikipedia started to take off, and we all realized that Wikipedia was open source. You could dick around with its content as much as you wanted. And so I just went on there and had a field day with ripping into the old school, because it became something of a, I mean, you know what the school was like. And then one day my dad was on the school council for a long time. My sister was still there. And one day I was on the computer at home, and my dad came upstairs and stood behind me and said, "Josh, just you ever heard of Wikipedia?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, go on Wikipedia and look up the school. And so I did, and I immediately started sweating because I knew my dad was on school council. And he makes me bring up the page, and he starts reading from it. He goes, "Who do you reckon's done that?" And I kind of had to hide my laughter because I knew it was me, but he didn't. I don't know if anything, because it had come up at a school council meeting. Basically, the principal was up in arms that someone had hijacked it.
I've got the printout right here, and you basically write down some notable criminals who are at the school, for number one, and non-criminals as well. And one of them, they are factual. One of them was Borat as well, who went to the school. Another one was one of your fictional characters called Hector Grieve, and obviously yourself, Joshua Humphreys, writer and comedian, author of Exquisite.
Yeah, that's obviously a much later amendment.
Now, what is the New Cavalier Reading Society?
Essentially it's a reading society. We're all members. I am its orchestrator, and I have these books. I can show you one. They're books essentially of notes, reading notes that I've accumulated over the last 10 or so, 11 years now, of just the best bits from everything I've ever read. And all I pretty much do is read. And then each week, so if you become a member, you get those books. It's the only way you can get them. They are the exclusive privilege of our membership. And then each week, we all read the same 25 pages from those books. And then I pick questions taken directly from the quotations. And we discuss those questions as a group. And I kind of impart to everybody the key fundamental political, philosophical, or literary issues that the questions in the readings bring up. It's kind of like it's a very efficient way of becoming conversant with the largest questions in the kind of Western philosophical tradition. We're currently in the middle of an ancient Greece semester.
Similar to a mastermind of readers getting together and talking about information through there. So I guess that's the easiest way to understand the topic. Now, you've done another 4 books we haven't touched on. So Creative Art of Wishfulness, To Save a Forest Virgin, and Imagine Treasures. Which one came? What was the third book?
I actually have a copy. I always travel with a copy of Grieve. That's the story of Hector Grieve, who, after gallivanting in Cambodia as the angriest young man in the world, after gallivanting for 7 or 8 years as a private soldier in Cambodia, he's told that he's bankrupt and he has to go back home to Melbourne, where he's found out that his dad is dying. And so it's basically someone who has been away from Melbourne for a very long time, having to go home and finding a completely transformed place, and a place that does not in any way align with his own very old-fashioned values.
And the fourth book, what was that about, and when did you write that?
The novel after that, the book after that was To Save a Forest Virgin, which was the Shakespearean rom-com, written in iambic pentameter, Shakespearean English, set in Melbourne, mostly around Brighton and St Kilda. And yeah, I thought that was going to be a bigger hit than it was, but it turns out people like to quote Shakespeare, but not to read him. So I quickly moved on from that one. And then I turned the Venice...
Yeah.
Then I turned the Venice tour into a book, which is Imagined Treasures. It's kind of I called it a splendid history of Venice.
Yeah, perfect. And I know the To Save a Forest Virgin was based on sort of Shakespearean meets Sex in the City. But who knows, one day one of your novels might get turned into a movie or a play. These things do take time. And The Creative Art of Wishfulness.
Yeah, so that...
Was that the last
Yeah, that
one?
was the last comedy novel. That came out 2019. It's kind of the culmination of everything I've been doing for so long. It portrays the anonymous artistic life as personified mostly by my brother, actually. And the main character is a poor, struggling artist, painter, toiling in obscurity in Bangkok. And then one day he accidentally meets a woman who runs wellness retreats in Bali. And she says, "Will you help me teach creativity on this wellness retreat?" He says, "Absolutely not." She says, "I'll give you $5,000. And so he jumps at the opportunity just for the money. But turns out she's in love with him. When he gets there, falls in love with a much younger girl. And then he has to kind of navigate the jealousy of one woman, the craziness of another, just so he can get this $5,000. And when he gets the $5,000, he goes to India to paint his magnum opus, his one great work of his youth. And yeah, to tell you any more would be to spoil the story. But he invites the younger girl with him, and so they try and kind of travel through India in the midst of a new relationship while he tries to paint his magnum opus.
And I know you spoke about your brother, Sam Humphreys, which I knew from back in the day. He's now your artist for the covers, but what else does Sam do?
So he works primarily he calls it a conservation illustrator. He draws the natural environment in order to bring awareness to and raise funds for disappearing ecosystems and the natural world. So that's what he does primarily when he's not working as my personal slave and illustrator. He did the cover for Grieve, which I think is my favorite of the covers that he's done. If you can see the cover of Grieve is based on Cambodian artistic motifs. But yeah, that's what Sam does. Conservation illustrator.
What is Josh Wright Book? What's that about?
I guess that's my... I guess you would call it my brand. I'm not really sure how that stuff works. But it's just because it portrays that they're comedy novels. I write novels, but they're meant to be funny. And just the Josh Wright Book is so inherently stupid that it's the first introduction that most people have to what I do.
And the My Book of Logs, what's that? That's an archive of gallivanting around the world, traveling, writing. Is that what that is?
No. The blog you're talking about.
You call it My Book of Logs.
The Book of Logs. I can't remember how that came about.
It is logs.
No, it's logs.
Yeah.
I think that's what I at some stage... It is Book of Logs, yeah. I think I at some stage... No, I'm not logging anymore. My logging license got taken off me by the federal government. And
what's next on the agenda for you? How many more novels are in you? I know you're same age as me, born in 85, 35. You're a November baby as well. So how many more novels do we have of Joshua Humphreys left? That's right.
Yeah, you're November as well.
Right.
How do I remember that stuff?
And a kangaroo supporter as well.
Next week I start writing my next novel. Yeah, a long time ago. I haven't watched a football match in a very long time. I'm this week. I have all the notes ready. I've been working on a new novel for the last 3 years on and off, and beginning Monday, I start writing the first draft for the next comedy novel. The novel already has a sequel in the works.
Where can we find your books?
Mostly Amazon. I think all of them are on Amazon. You can buy them through Amazon and give Amazon half the money. Or you can buy them through my website, joshuahumphreys.com, and give Amazon less of the money. That's where they are. They're in bookstores. They're in some bookstores, mostly in the US.
And when are you coming back to Australia, if any time? Is there any plans or...?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen my family in almost 2 years now because of COVID. and I will fly home as soon as Australia stops being so pedantic about COVID. I refuse to fly home if there's mandatory hotel quarantine in place. So I won't be returning until that's gone.
You were featured in the. You were actually featured in the news back home. You were one of the three Australians that decided not to come home to Australia when lockdown began because it was a $3,000 ticket, or up to even $5,000 ticket to come home and quarantine. And you were in London and decided, you know what, I'm going straight to Mexico. So you went to JFK, empty airport, straight to Mexico. I've read the article. What was that experience like, going back to COVID? And
I think people in Australia are really struggling to understand the worldwide nature of COVID. In the countries where it's more rampant, it's not the main focus of the news or of people's mentality. They're just living with it, and it's not ubiquitous and abundant. You don't see it every day. It's not like people are running through the streets, pulling their hair out, screaming. And I just knew that Australia, with its political history, was going to be authoritarian, pedantic, and condescending about it, and I knew I would get trapped there. So I knew very, very early that flying home was the worst possible alternative. 'Cause I'd still be stuck there if I was there, and I'd have to be living on my brother's couch.
yeah, we can't leave the country ourselves, so we're locked in Australia. It's not a bad place to be locked down to, but still locked down nonetheless. I myself used to live in London for a year back in 2012, and lovely place. And I know after Mexico, you went back to London as well. Whereabouts in London?
Normally in Battersea. I have friends and a kind of a small network in Battersea, which is just south of the river. So I can normally find a couch to sleep on, or an empty flat to rent for a short amount of time.
Yeah, fantastic. And where's some of the places that you want to go that you haven't been to yet, that's on the bucket list to become an expert and possibly do tours on? Is there anything on your list in the future, that places you want to see?
Japan is the only place on my list. It's the one thing on my list, actually, Japan. That I've tried to get there twice, and both times, the month before, I'd booked flights, booked a week of accommodation, and both times, just purely by chance, the month before I left, I spilt once coffee, once beer on my laptop and fried it. So instead of actually visiting Japan, I had to buy new laptops. So I couldn't go. Yeah, so Japan's the only place that I'm longing to get to that I've not yet been to.
Now, just a couple of final questions before we wrap up. Now, this is going to be a bit of an oddball one. Now, I know you're from London as well, and you've probably seen the TV show Come Dine With You. If you were to host a dinner party with 3 famous people from the past, who would they be, and what would you serve them?
3 famous people from the past. They have to be dead?
They can be dead or alive, up to you.
I think the first one would be John Ruskin. That's actually a good question. I don't know the answer off the top of my head. John Ruskin, who is the largest kind of intellectual and artistic influence on me. I would love to have a chat with John Ruskin, and I would love to get his take on 2021 and the succession of events. He died in 1900, so I'd love to sit him down, tell him what happened, and just get him to talk after that. I don't know what I'd probably serve him roast lamb. This is the most substantial thing that I'm good at cooking. John Ruskin, 3 people. That's a lot of people, Mika.
That's okay. You can just have you and John Ruskin as an intimate dinner with roast lamb.
No, sounds way too romantic. He was a weird dude in his personal relationships. John Ruskin. I would love to have a chat with Hitler. I think it would be fascinating just to see if he could actually hold a normal, regular conversation. I wouldn't put Hitler on my top 3. Who else? Jesus, I guess, would be one of the big ones. Just to, I guess, I'd be most interested in having dinner with Jesus in order to separate the way he spoke and the way people ended up saying that he spoke, just to find out if there's how much authenticity there is in the New Testament. General Patton, that's another one. I would love to have a lunch or dinner with General Patton. I'd serve him grilled meat. There you go, Jesus, Patton, and Russ.
Perfect. And one final question. Was Shakespeare a real person?
Absolutely. Anybody who thinks he wasn't is just reading the wrong things. I don't go in for literary conspiracy theories.
That's okay, no problem. Now, Josh, where can people find you and follow you on social media? Where do you hang out mostly online?
Mostly on Instagram. Joshua Humphreys is my handle with V's instead of U's. Same with my website, joshuahumphreys.com. I don't really use Facebook other than for personal stuff, but Instagram is where I keep my audience and readership abreast of everything that I'm doing.
I think it's a good time to end it there. But ladies and gentlemen, Joshua Humphreys, the man, the myth, the mystery, the ex-student from Glaston Park, ex-Australian, novel writer, man of many talents, motorcycle rider, and international man of mystery. Josh, thanks for being on the show, and speak to you soon.
Thanks, Mika. It's lovely to chat to you after 18 years.
It's been too long.
Thanks for having me along.
No problem. Speak to you soon.
Thanks, Mika.